You blended right in with the...
I was looking for the red jacket.
Yeah, so was I, actually.
Sorry guys, I think you guessed it.
We're just waiting for the streaming to start. There we go. Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting, a regular meeting of council, to order for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I acknowledge that we're gathered in the heart of Treaty 7 territory of Southern Alberta. This land is home to the Blackfoot Confederacy, consisting of the Siksika, Kainai, and Pakanai First Nations, also the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and our most adjacent Indigenous neighbors, the Stoney Nakoda, comprised of the Bearspaw, Goodstoney, and Chiniki First Nations. Further, we are located within the Rocky View Métis District within the Battle River Territory, District 4. The town of Canmore is committed to working to live in right relations and to advance truth and reconciliation as we acknowledge the many Indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations. I'm grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. As we are all treaty people, we each have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor all life. Now we're going to move to approval of the agenda. So I'm going to be, first of all, move the agenda for March 4th, 2025 regular meeting of council be approved, but I'm going to bring an motion that council amend the agenda for the March 4th, 2025 regular council meeting by adding as item H6, Assessment Review Board Public Member Appointments, and H7, Purchase Policy Exception ShareGate by Workleap. These are both timely matters that will be quick, but will need to be dealt with today. So first, turning to the amending motion, anyone wish to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now returning to the main motion, approval of the agenda for March 4th, 2025 regular meeting of council now as amended. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we have a couple of public hearings this morning. We're going to turn to those first. So I now call to order the public hearing for bylaws 2024-23 and 2024-4. The purpose of these bylaws are to amend the municipal development plan and the land use bylaw with respect to steep creeks due to the successful completion of the Cougar Creek debris retention structure and the relative reduction of flood risk in the Cougar Creek area. The public hearing will proceed as follows. After I provide this introduction, administration will provide a summary of the matter under consideration to set a context for the hearing. Council will have opportunity to ask questions of administration after their presentation. Then I will invite members of the public to speak. There will be an opportunity for council to ask questions of clarification after each speaker presents. Once anyone present who wishes to speak has done so, the municipal clerk will provide the names of anybody that's provided written submissions. Then council will again have opportunity to ask questions of administration before the public hearing is closed. And so with that, let's move to administration's presentation. Mr. Schneider.
Good morning,
welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm just going to get the presentation up on my computer.
Perfect.
And then I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ms. Collette from Planning and Mr. Camille from Engineering, who will walk through council through the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Ms. Collette, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I am here to give a brief presentation.
If you could
of-
just push the microphone right, push it down so it's pointing a little bit more right towards your mouth. There you go.
Let's try this again. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm here to provide a brief presentation of bylaws 2024-23 and 2024-24, which are the Steep Creek updates to the Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw. As mentioned a month ago when we met, after the flood events of 2013, the MDP and LUB were amended to respond and guide development in high hazard areas of the community. And now that the Cougar Creek retention structure is complete or substantially complete, we're here to make further amendments to adjust to the change of situation. So the key changes to the municipal development plan are to sections 3.5 Steep Creeks and the flow chart for the Steep Creek decision-making. Largely, the updates are meant to capture a change in an update to current ways of responding to flood mitigation, updating some charts, and other such things. Another element is the removal of the development hold zone. The development hold zone was originally established to kind of prevent further development. It was not a zone that was actually applied through the land use bylaw, and so we have no need for it, so we're able to remove it. It also adds the residual hazard zone, which is to mainly capture the areas around Cougar Creek, and it has the same requirements as the low hazard zone. The term residual hazard zone is meant to respond to and recognize that there is still residual risk, despite the fact that we now have mitigation. There are also some changes proposed to the land use bylaw, mainly around section 7.8, which is the Steep Creeks Hazard Overlay. And it adds the residual zone, which has the same requirements as the low hazard zone, and removes the development hold zone. There's also the addition of a general requirement to all development in the Steep Creek Hazard Overlay, which is the removal of, or the restriction to have new windows and doors at grade for additions. There are also amendments to the Steep Creek hazard mapping to respond to the Cougar Creek area, and then also to respond to the area structure plans of Three Sisters and Smith Creek. Some additional studies were conducted, and that can inform some mapping changes there. This is a very poor map, but it shows the large expansion of the application of the Steep Creeks Hazard Overlay, and more detailed maps are included in your council package. A mail-out was done to all the properties within the Steep Creek Hazard area, which was a very large mail-out of over 3,000 properties. And we received quite a few comments, mostly around clarification on how a person's property is specifically affected by the Steep Creek Hazard Overlay changes. So those were clarified for those residents. And then also some questions around future development on the two properties at Grotto Road. We addressed that at a committee of the whole meeting. And that will be something that administration brings to council at a later date to address those. And then also asking questions around how future development intensification would be addressed. And obviously it would be discouraged in terms of future land use bylaw amendments and redistricting applications, but the permitted uses and discretionary districts of the applicable land use bylaw districts would still apply. It is recommended that council give second reading and third reading to both these bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before moving to public submissions, looking to council to see if there are any questions at this point. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Collette, for your presentation. I'm curious how, if there's a discouraging of any intensification, are accessory dwelling units allowed as permitted or discretionary in the land use bylaw currently?
Through the chair. Whatever in the applicable land use districts, so the Steep Creek Hazard Area applies to properties in a number of different districts. But in the Cougar Creek area, for example, it's largely the R1A district, which is the small lot residential district. And there are a number of permitted and discretionary uses, and an additional dwelling unit is one of those uses. So that would be contemplated there.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Collette. I was just curious if we could speak a little bit more to the chart that clarifies the probability of risk and number of fatalities, because I think I've had some questions from the public saying we don't quite understand the slope line and what it means to be above or below. So if you could speak to that chart just briefly, that'd be so grateful. Thank you.
Certainly,
What page are you looking at, by the way? So we
Well,
can turn to it.
in terms of that chart, we could look at in our council package, page 42 of 129, which shows the new chart with reference versus the older one. Yeah.
Certainly, I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleague Felix.
Okay, great.
Who's wise and all-knowing in these matters.
Great. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Khmer.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, it would have been great to have it on the screen. However, we don't have it, so I have it here.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, so it's the chart that it's on section, it's in section 351 in the MDP. And previously, we had a similar chart. It was a little bit more colors in it, red at the top, orange and yellow, I believe, something like that. So the new chart that we have in here is very similar, actually. It's the same concept as before. We haven't really changed much in there. It's basically trying to express the very similar thing. So what it's showing is on the graph at the on the x-axis at the bottom, it's the number of fatalities that could actually happen in one event. Okay. On the y-axis, to keep it simple, we have two different y-axes, but to keep it simple, it's the frequency of such an event that could happen.
Like a probability.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay,
probability,
all right.
yes, correct. So what the graph is showing is with that line is, for example, if you have an event with one fatality in that event, that specific event, the group risk usually that the public is willing to accept is quite a bit higher than compared to if you have 10 fatalities in one event.
Right, okay.
And that's what that line is being shown on that graph there. Mm-hmm. And what we have is above the line, we have a big arrow that shows increased risk. And once we go past that line, it's an increased risk for the general population, anybody living in that specific area or being around there during that event. And it's where we don't want to go. Below that line is decreased risk, and that's basically what we're trying to achieve. So if we find through our hazard assessment or risk assessment, excuse me, that we've undertaken that the group risk is shown being above that line, we're trying to move it down to below that line. Okay. So that's really what it's being shown here.
Okay, great. So essentially, like, given the severity of an event, we have like the degree of tolerance with regards to like degree of fatality, and the higher the potential risk of a mass fatality, we have an even lower and lower acceptance of that. Okay,
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Well done.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to say a few words here about public submissions. Okay, so we are now going to receive public verbal submissions. Council would like to hear from anyone and everyone who wishes to speak today. In that spirit, we'll be enforcing a 5-minute time limit on presentations, not including the time for questions for council, just to ensure that we give everyone a chance. If you plan to speak, you should be aware that you will appear on the live web stream of this hearing, and that a recording of this web stream is published online. After you're done speaking, I would ask that you go to the clerk's desk, and there's a list there just to sign your name or to print your name so that we can make sure that it's included in the minutes appropriately. While you are speaking, we ask that you direct your comments to council and limit your comments to the subject matter of the hearing. Council will be given an opportunity to ask questions of clarification after each presenter has finished speaking. We ask that speakers and members of the gallery join council in supporting the rights of everyone to be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. That includes not responding with either cheering or admonishing, as such will impact the feeling of safety of others who may wish to speak either for or against. As chair, I will intervene if necessary to uphold these principles. Now I will open the floor to speakers. First, based on those, actually there are no registered, so we won't go to those first. We'll turn to those in the chamber who wish to speak, rotating in between those who wish to speak in favor, in opposition, or in a neutral position. So, is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the bylaw? Correct. Yep. The same subject matter. Anyone wishing to speak opposed to the bylaw?
Sorry, if I can clarify, you're in favor of the bylaw, you're in favor of amending the bylaw to
Yes.
allow? Okay.
Yeah.
I would like to speak in favor.
Oh, you would? Okay, please, please come forward. Provide us your name and welcome.
Thank you. Council, is this good?
Yes.
My name is Dennis Brayman. I reside at 357 Grotto Road, so that is in the flood risk zone. I operate a bed and breakfast out of the lower level of my home. I've been doing so for the past 5 years. With the restriction on operation, May 15 to July 1, the town has asked me to not operate, so I leave it vacant during those times. And I would like, now that the flood risk has been largely mitigated, I would like to be able to operate during those times. Specifically, the month of June is one of 4 summer months where, as a tourist community, as we all know, the 80% of the business is done in 20% of the year. So that would be a significant positive impact for me financially. And so I just wanted to speak my piece to let it be known that it would affect me financially very directly in a positive manner if this bylaw were to be amended to allow me to operate a full 12 months.
Sorry. Thank you for your remarks, and before you go, just seeing if there's any questions or clarification. No, seeing none, so yes, please sign. Thank you very much for being here today. Okay, I saw Mr. Sparks. You had raised your hand to speak against the amendments. Please, welcome, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I brought notes on my daughter's Harry Potter notepad, so if anyone needs the instructions for Polyjuice Potion, I have them here. So I'm Dan Sparks. I know everybody up at the front and a lot of people in the back. 20-year resident of Cougar Creek. I live on Pioneer Road. Been in Canmore a long time. I was also on the livability task force, so I am fairly in tune what's happening in terms of the needs, I think, of local residents and what's happening in terms of affordable housing. My concerns around the bylaw are essentially setting further limits on affordable housing in the Cougar Creek area, further limits in town as they apply to Cougar Creek. We have just sort of put together a few thoughts and stats ahead of time. Just on my street, if I look right or left, 3 houses either way, there's 13 kids who were born and raised in Canmore who are getting to adult age, who someday may want to have their own homes. I'm also a realtor, as a lot of you know. In the last year, there have been 10 sales of single-family homes in Cougar Creek. The low end of those was $1,150,000. High end was 1.7. Median was 1.4. So that's what it costs to buy a house in Cougar Creek. The limiting in terms of intensification of use is simply going to further push locals out from being able to afford to live in that area. We're at a point, and we've been past actually the point where single-family homes are simply beyond the affordability of people in Canmore. If we want these 13 kids to be able to continue to live and thrive and raise their own families in Canmore, intensification of use and densification going forward is vital, in my opinion, in these older areas. This is not me saying that we need more development. What I'm saying is we need more affordable housing, and affordable housing equals ADUs, equals basement suites. It equals eventual densification to duplexes with secondary suites, duplexes with secondary suites and ADUs out the back. In Cougar Creek, we're dealing with very straightforward lots. Generally, they're rectangles. You're not dealing with a whole lot of cul-de-sacs and weird pie-shaped lots that are hard to build on. These lots are prime for intensification or densification. Question that I'll sort of put to council, who can then put to administration, is I'm a little unclear reading this in terms of the windows and doors at grade. It references no windows and doors at grade in additions. I am unclear whether a house that already has a basement can have windows and doors added to create a secondary suite, or to legalize a currently illegal suite. Again, go up and down my street, and there's not a lot of places that don't already have illegal suites in them that could be used to legalize. Legalizing those suites and creating new legal suites will also provide a path for people to get mortgages on already extremely expensive properties. Banks are generally not going to lend money on an illegal suite. They won't recognize that rental income. I really think the town is doing some great work in terms of affordable housing. However, more needs to be done to empower residents to solve their own problems, to add secondary suites, to eventually tear down old houses and build duplexes with secondary suites, that sort of thing. The limiting of intensification, I can't see how it doesn't limit densification going forward. We need to leave the door open for that. I'm not saying quash this whole thing and kill it. I'm saying maybe table it for a while, talk about it, see how you can leave the door open for more intensification and densification going forward. I'm just very concerned that if we slam the door on this now, you're limiting a tremendous amount of potential real estate that could be used for affordable, attainable housing in Canmore.
Thank you, Mr. Spark. Councillor Graham, you have a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Sparks, and I appreciate all your comments.
Okay.
I'm curious about, you talked about the legalization of secondary suites and the ability to finance those.
Yep.
Currently, if a suite is illegal, you can't include that in your financing package. Is that correct?
Generally, a bank is not going to recognize the market rents for an illegal suite, as a general statement.
As a general statement, yeah.
Yeah.
And what would happen to values should these suites be legalized as far as affordability is concerned?
It's quite possible values would increase due to the legalization of the suites. However, values are really just increasing across the board exponentially. I don't know if the addition of the legality of the suite is going to cause a major sea change as far as that's concerned.
So value and income aren't directly correlated in this town, unfortunately.
Sorry, say that again?
So values and income based on mortgageability isn't really linked.
Oh, they have nothing to do with each other. So,
Unfortunately.
yeah, no, absolutely. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Sparks.
no problem.
Any other questions? Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Worship. This is maybe perhaps a question for the administration. As for instance, Mr. Sparks.
If you could save the questions for administration
Okay.
until at the end.
All right, yeah, because I was trying to get context for what Mr. Sparks was
Yeah,
referring
and
to
I've
about
made
windows
I
and
made the
grade.
note.
Yeah, okay, thank
So
you.
administration will be
If you want,
asking-
ask me, and then I'll turn around and ask. We'll have like a game. Pass me a note, and I'll say if they like
I don't have my
you
Harry
or
Potter
just
notes
like
here,
you.
hold on.
So just a heads up to administration, I will be asking for some clarification into the question as to what is an addition that would then trigger the prohibition about windows and doors at grade. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And if you could
thank
just
you.
sign the list there, please, Mr. Spark. Thank you. Okay. Okay, looking now to see if there's anyone that would like to speak in favor of the amendments. Is there anybody that would like to speak in a neutral fashion? Anyone that would like to speak opposed to the amendments? Is there anybody that would like to speak at all to this, this particular amendment? Okay, so that's the end of the public submissions. I will now ask the clerk to advise if there are any written submissions.
There were none.
There are no written submissions? Okay, so then I will ask administration, first of all, do you have any closing comments that you wanted to make based on what you heard? Okay, so I would like to ask the question then around the question that was raised about admissions or additions. If they're already allowed and there's already a basement suite and it becomes a legal suite, is that an addition? Or is what would trigger the addition that then triggers the prohibition about windows and doors at grade? Ms. Collette.
Hello, thank you for the question. Through the chair, an addition would be a whole other structure that would add GFA. So if you're adding windows and doors to an existing part, like an existing basement, this provision wouldn't apply in that case.
So you're going to build a tiny home out back or something like that.
That would be an addition.
That'd be an addition.
Or, well, actually, it'd be an additional dwelling unit, so it'd be a whole separate. If you were to add an attached garage to your house,
Okay.
that would be an addition.
Okay, so a current basement will not be subject to the doors and windows at grade unless, of course, the house was torn down and you had to rebuild it.
Yes, or it didn't have a basement and you wanted to add one. That would be a challenge, I imagine, to construct, but hypothetically, that would be an addition.
True story. My grandmother and her children during World War II dug out their basement below their house using bucket and pails and passed them out the window. So it can be done. Yeah, takes a while.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faubert, you have a question.
I just had a follow-up question. I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding the advice from administration with regard to the residual hazard area and the implication for potential future intensification of development. And I just want to make sure that, and I think this relates to the graph and the risk assessment, is that what we're saying is that putting any more people in this zone increases the risk to a level that we're not comfortable with. And that an intensification beyond what's currently allowed in the land use bylaw would do that. Is that correct?
Mr. Camille.
The risk was, for example, for Cougar Creek, the risk analysis was done in 2013, 2014. With the structure in place, we have reduced that risk to below that line in the graph that we talked about earlier. Intensification could potentially move the risk back up to the line or above the line. I do not know. We haven't done the analysis. So from that point of view, but that's what we'd be potentially looking at, is doing a new risk assessment at some point that would show that potentially the risk would be above that line.
Okay, so there is risk, but we haven't, and we know from the one we did after the flood that it's without a structure, it's in an intolerable area. So now we have the structure, but we need to change the maps to reflect it, but we're not sure of the residual, the risk, because we haven't done another risk analysis like we did in 2013, 14. So the residual area isn't something that would be forever. What I hear is that there's potential to understand the risk with further analysis, and that understanding could lead to changes or could just affirm that it's we don't want to put more intensification or people there because of the risk.
Yes, so the risk, once the structure was completed, we did a risk reanalysis to make sure that it's been done way before that, to make sure that the structure would actually move the group risk below that line.
Yeah.
So that's been confirmed. The residual hazard zone that we're introducing is the original intent was really to ensure that we still have resiliency in the community. And what it does really is anytime there's any buildings or any additions, you have to follow the engineering design guidelines as if you're in the low hazard zone, which if, for people who understand what it is, it's actually not a massive undertaking, or it's not that difficult to achieve. That was really the intent of the residual hazard zone. The intensification portion is slightly different, and yes, there's potentially more risk reassessment that we'd have to do in terms of, for example, how many more people you would need to tip it over again. I don't know.
Because I always imagined that Grotto and that parts of Cougar Creek would eventually redevelop, and that would be an opportunity to include densification and affordable housing. And I hear that concern expressed in the public hearing, and the residual zone, to me, was saying like there's no chance ever because there's too much risk, but it sounds like we still maybe have some risk work to do. I just kind of want to understand the permanency of the residual hazard zone. I think that's the best way to ask my question. Thank you.
Ms. Smithers?
I'll take a shot at it, and then Mr. Camille can correct my thinking on the fly. So the residual hazard zone is based on the current mitigations through the Cougar Creek flood mitigation structure, which was created to address steep creek flood risk for the existing development allowed in the area. So have we modeled potential future scenarios of intensification within that residual area? No, not at this time. So is the residual hazard area permanent? Not necessarily. The work hasn't been done because the focus was on protecting the existing community. And we know that development in alluvial fans is never a first choice scenario. So what we've done with the flood mitigation structure is protect the existing development in that alluvial fan, recognizing that could we turn the clock back 100 years or so, we probably wouldn't allow any development in that area. So we've made it as safe as reasonably possible, which I think Mr. Camille has spoken to. What we're saying is that intensification beyond that level, we have not done the risk assessment to know whether or not the existing structures and mitigations that are in place could address intensification in that area. So is it forever? No. Is it for now? Yes.
Thank you that is an amazing, and thank you so much. And I apologize if my questions were really clumsy to get there.
So just a follow-up on that then. Smithers, if this is passed, what's going to trigger that work to get done?
So two things. One, council could choose, or administration could recommend, excuse me, a future year's capital project to do that assessment. And then that would inform if there are additional actual construction projects in place that could mitigate work. Council could always make a choice to take that work on. So that's one option that's big picture option. I think on an individual basis, homeowners could come forward with an amendment, with an application to amend the land use bylaw. And then as part of that consideration of that land use amendment, we would ask for an analysis into the impact on flood risk in the area. So a couple different approaches to it.
So that would put a lot of work onto one individual potentially.
Correct.
Yeah.
In the absence of the town taking on that broader work, which would also be a considerable resource if there were additional flood mitigation requirements that we needed to put in place.
Okay.
There's also a high likelihood that we'll be trying over time to do an update to our hazard and risk assessment, because things are changing with climate change and development in town. So we need to look at that. Some of our assessments are more than 10 years old now. So we'll be looking at updating at some point through a capital project those assessments.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Graham, you have a question?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a simpler one. And to address the gentleman who's running the area B&B, is that a restriction on his license, or is that a restriction on the, within the bylaw? I might have missed that piece. No.
No, yeah, so
So I guess the question is will that restriction be removed with this change? Yeah.
yes, it will be removed, and the restriction is actually in any areas that have a moderate or high hazard zone. So if you have a B&B in those zones, that it applies. However, the Cougar Creek map, for example, the overlay has changed mostly to residual hazard zone, which now permits B&B to be operated throughout the year.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. And Councillor Faubert, I think your question was a great one because it's got me thinking more. I'm just trying to see this through the lens of a potential homeowner in say, the Cougar Creek area, and say they did want to densify, and so perhaps if they were going to do like a separate building, like an ADU, is there actually a practical pathway that they could do that under these current rules as well? Because I just want more clarity towards that piece, if there's a way forward, and just a little more information regarding like the new windows, doors at grade piece.
Through the chair, thank you for your question. Anything that's currently contemplated in the land use district would follow the same process. So additional dwelling units in, for example, the Cougar Creek area, it would be a standard process. The intensification, densification conversation and where we're discouraging it and having this who completes the hazard assessment conversation would be if you were taking the R1A district, for example, and trying to bump it up to like an R3 or a more intense district. That's where the need for a hazard assessment would kind of kick in, and further analysis would occur. But in terms of like the site specific, as long as it's contemplated in the district that exists, it would be contemplated.
Okay, so there is a pathway forward for someone to still do an ADU on their lot. It would trigger a more intense thing if we were to say rezone the area. Look,
Yes.
it's like we're going away from R1A to like R2, et cetera. Okay.
Exactly.
And that would probably go part and parcel with like a heightened risk assessment too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to close this public hearing then. And just so that we can change gears, I'm going to allow us a 5-minute break here so we can start to turn our minds to the subject matter of the next public hearing. So we will, actually it's going to be a 6-minute break. We'll return at 9:45. Wait to find out that we're streaming again. Okay, we are back. Now moving to the next public hearing. I call to order the public hearing for Bylaw 2024-37. The purpose of this bylaw is to amend the Palliser Lane Perpetual Affording Housing Direct Control District bylaw with respect to rear yard setback and provide flexibility with respect to building design requirements. I think everyone here has already heard me give the introduction. Essentially, the administration is going to provide a summary. Council will have an opportunity for questions. Then I'll invite members of the public to speak, and I will speak to that at that time. I do want to make sure that anyone present who wishes to speak does so, and I will be providing that opportunity in due course. And so, Mr. Schneider, whenever you're hooked up there and ready, the microphone is yours for the summary of the subject matter.
You sure? You don't want to do it like this?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stiver, and Mr. Schneider, welcome again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Drost was here for the presentation for first reading. Unfortunately, she had a slip on the ice, and she is day-to-day with a lower body injury for the next couple of days. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm here in her place to present this item. So this is Bylaw 2024-37, which is the Palliser Lane Perpetual Affordable Housing Direct Control District, and we are proposing a few amendments to it. The site is located at 100 Palliser Lane, which is adjacent to two existing apartment buildings to the north, and Highway 1 is directly to the south. Now, the original DC district was passed in May of 2024, and through the design process, it became apparent that that amendments were needed to legitimize the building design that was proposed, and to make sure that it's efficient both in site design and from a sustainability point of view. And I note that Mr. Matthew from CCH is in the room this morning as well. So the amendments that are proposed are to the rear yard setback. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide. The original intent of the 12-meter setback was to provide a landscape buffer along Palliser Trail. With the site planning that CCH has done, there is one corner of the building which will basically be at the property line, and you can see that that's circled and highlighted in yellow. But for the rest of the design, there is a landscape buffer that is maintained along Highway 1. So we're looking to keep a portion of the rear frontage closest to Palliser Trail and facing off to Highway 1. The other amendments that are proposed have to do with the relocation of 144372. This is more of a housekeeping amendment, which would be located further into the bylaw. That's not going to change. And the second bylaw change is to provide a little bit more flexibility with respect to applying the town's architectural and design criteria as a trade-off for extra building sustainability. This was suggested by CCH's architect, who are proposing various building elements, but it's very difficult to do that under the original rules of what's contemplated within Section 13. With respect to neighborhood engagement, the developer CCH didn't do initial public consultation, but through the process, we did do a mail out to the Blackston and the building and the adjacent property owners. We did receive concerns with respect to height, impacts of shadows, views, and parking concerns. However, we're satisfied that the amendments actually keep the buildings away from Palliser Lane, so we're making sure that the buildings are as far away from the adjacent properties as possible. Administration are recommending second and third reading to this bylaw following the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. That list of concerns that were raised, it didn't look like any of them that you had listed had pertained at all to the subject matter of these amendments. Is that correct?
Yeah, from my understanding and speaking with Mr. Ost, no.
Okay. They were things that were obviously brought
Yep,
up.
and we're not,
Yeah.
CCH isn't looking for a variance for height, for example. They're looking to build within what's contemplated within the district already, and they're not looking for any variances with respect to parking. It's just the specific site planning variances that have come up.
Great, thank you. Councillor Forberry, you have a question?
Yes, and they did not submit anything for the public hearing, did they?
Pardon me?
Like the condo board didn't submit there was no formal submission, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much. So now we're going to move to public verbal submissions. Council would like to hear from everyone who wishes to speak today. There will be a 5-minute time limit on presentations as shown on that clock. That won't include any time for questions, so you'll have a chance to say whatever you would like to share. If you plan to speak, you should be aware that you will appear on the live web stream of the hearing and that a recording of this web stream is published online. While you are speaking, we ask that you direct your comments to council and limit your comments to the subject matter of the hearing. Council will be given an opportunity to ask questions of clarification after each presenter has finished speaking. We ask that speakers and members of the gallery join council in supporting the rights of everyone to be treated with dignity, fairness, and respect. That includes not responding with either cheering or admonishing, as such will impact the feeling of safety of others who may wish to speak either for or against. Now I'll open the floor to speakers. And if anyone is present in the chamber who wishes to speak, we'll do so in a rotating manner of in favor, in opposition, and neutral. So would anybody like to speak in favor of these amendments? Mr. Sparks?
I will be way briefer at this time. Speaking as a former member of CCH for many years, former chair, as well as a member of the Affordability Livability Task Force. I think this is great to see. More affordable housing is what the town desperately needs, and putting it wherever we can is, I think, very important. I'd like to applaud administration and the town for what they're doing on this. This is great to see this proactive work, and hope to see shovels in the ground as soon as humanly possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sparks, and I know you're on the list there. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Looking to see if anyone would like to speak against the proposed amendments. Would anybody like to speak in a neutral fashion? I'll just open up. Was there anyone here that would like to speak to this matter? Okay, seeing none, I'll turn to the clerk and ask if there are any written submissions.
Yes, for this one, we received one written submission from K. O'Rourke, and that is in opposition.
Okay, one in opposition. Thank you. Does administration have anything that they would like to add based on what they've heard?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Ask council if there are any questions that have arisen. Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now close the public hearing, and we are going to take a break until 10:15, and we'll come back at that time to carry on with the rest of the agenda of this meeting. Thank you. going again. Or have you started again? Okay. I just noticed we're down a couple of admin there. Well, let me know when we're on. Okay, we're back, and now we're going to proceed with item D of our agenda, approval of minutes. Turning first, February 4th. Any errors or omissions noticed by anyone? Okay, I will move approval of the minutes of February 4th, 2025, regular meeting of council as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now, February 11th. Any errors or omissions there? Okay, I'll move approval of the minutes of February 11th, 2025, special meeting of council as circulated. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving on to item G1, Steep Creek updates to the Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw. We have just received a presentation, and so we're not going to have another presentation. Just in case anything has occurred to you as a question since the public hearing this morning, I will ask if there are any further questions. Okay, then I will move the council gives second reading to Town of Canmore Municipal Development Plan Bylaw Amendment 2024-23 Steep Creek. In speaking to that motion, and in fact to all of the motions, I would say that this is good news. This has come about because of the successful construction of the Cougar Creek flood debris retention structure, which has essentially moved, holding the area in abeyance, and really holding two lots completely empty and having no development whatsoever into now a residual hazard zone. Of course, we have to keep in mind that had we known at the time of the development starting in Cougar Creek area what we know now, that would never have been developed. An alluvial fan is too dangerous to develop on when you do the risk or hazard risk assessment. Now that we have a $84 million structure protecting it, though, it does allow what is there to stay. The question is should it be more intensified or not? Can it be and still maintain a sufficient level of risk? So I am supportive of these bylaws. I'm just giving a heads up that following the completion of dealing with this matter, I will be bringing a motion arising for us to seek additional information that will determine the appropriateness of these measures in the long run, all right? And I'll get to that afterwards. But I am in favor of all of these motions. They're appropriate for the current time. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm speaking in favor of both the Land Use Bylaw Amendment and the Municipal Development Plan Amendment. And just also in recognition of this being a milestone in terms of our recovery after the 2013 debris flood in Cougar Creek. And I think that this is a place that we needed to reach in order to start asking the questions and having the conversations that'll come next. And that's why I'm grateful for the fact that we were able to receive information in the public hearing that I think helped us better understand the current risk and the future steps of understanding what additional risk might be tolerable. So I also know that this probably won't be the last time that we are amending the Steep Creek maps, as there are more creeks that have flood mitigation work that is needed on them, including the one that affects the Palliser area. So I'm really grateful for all of the work that has happened and to get us to this place. because that's well over a decade of a lot of heavy lifting. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will happily be supporting where we're moving forward with these Steep Creek updates. I remember years ago I had a chance to fly above like the Cougar Creek area and deep into the alluvial fan, and it is ginormous. You can imagine the amount of water that would collect through all that and come flowing down. And so also, we've had kudos to admin for like helping generate this incredible new retention structure at a price tag that was really high, but it's super important. I really like how in the current setup now, we're able to open up some businesses to expand their operation capability. In addition, there is a pathway, so those that are currently interested in densification, they can do ADUs, provided they meet certain levels of windows and doors at grade, or does not include windows and doors at grade. So there is a pathway there. And I also feel as we move forward, as the town densifies, it would probably be prudent to have some more discussion about what would happen and the implications if certain areas densified, if there's a capacity to do that. At the end of the day, this is also about safety and life, and I feel where we're at right now, we have a smart risk tolerance, and we just need to search further to see where that edge is. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you. I'm also happy to support these updates and amendments to the MDP and the land use bylaw. For many things that have already been said, but again, these are living documents, so any changes we do now, we can change it again later. So I'm happy with the current changes. It gets us to a point where we couldn't have certain things, and now we can have certain things. I think it is important to have that residual zone because it still is a hazard. Yes, we have the structure in place, and hopefully we'll be good, and we'll never have to have it really fully utilized, and it'll just be there out of mind, and things will be great. But it's still important to know that there is that risk, and I think having that residual risk zone just keeps that in top of mind. So I'm happy to support these amendments.
Great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give third reading to Town of Canmore Municipal Development Plan Bylaw Amendment 2024-23 Steep Creek. Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Now moving to the LUB. The council gives second reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2024-24 Steep Creek. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And I move that council give third reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2024-24 Steep Creek. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. As mentioned, I'd like to bring a motion arising, and I've sent that to the municipal clerk. See if we can get it up on the screen here. It just takes a moment. Okay. So I'm just going to ask for one slight change there. Instead of budget review in 2026, if I could have the budget amendment process. So I'm going to move that administration return to council during the 2026 budget amendment process with information about the cost and timing of a potential capital project to do a revised risk assessment for the Cougar Creek area to determine the appropriateness of the residual hazard zone restrictions in the area. Speaking to this motion, I think that what we have before us and what we've just approved is prudent. It is the appropriate path forward, not knowing whether or not intensification will in fact bring us above the accessible risk line. However, until we actually have the study, it's an artificial line or artificial barrier, because if the risk assessment comes back and says, you know what, with some slight intensification, maybe allowing R2 or whatnot, we still are below the line, then we can respond accordingly. If it comes back and confirms that in fact any intensification will put us into an unreasonable risk zone, then obviously we would maintain the current boundaries for now. So this is basically making sure that it does not fall into the cracks. We'll have a motion, we'll get information back to us so that we can then determine when we could potentially do this work and assess the restrictions that are currently in place. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. I would be more than pleased to support this motion. I feel it's great timing in terms of where we're at right now, and I think if there are people in the Cougar Creek area contemplating perhaps densification, this would be a great way to see if there's a good way for it to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone? Councillor Mera.
Thank you, Mayor Carlser, for bringing this forward. I will support your motion. I just think it adds another layer of protection for whichever way it goes.
Great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll now move to item G2, which is the Palliser Lane Perpetual Affordable Housing Direct Control District. Once again, we just had a presentation. I will ask the question before I put a motion on the table if any questions have arisen since the public hearing this morning. Okay, seeing none, I will move that council give second reading to revised land use bylaw amendment 2024-37, Palliser Lane Perpetual Affordable Housing Direct Control District. In speaking to the motion, I think that this is a entirely appropriate amendment given the awkward shaped piece of land we have, and that essentially the concerns with regards to a buffer with the highway is still maintained. The concerns raised through administration mostly dealt with matters that were not the subject of the amendment, and so those decisions have already been made and they're not proposed to be changed through these amendments. So I will support this motion. Councillor Faubert, you'd like to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am speaking in favor of the amendment. I believe that these changes make this a better site for development and a better neighborhood in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give third reading to revised land use bylaw amendment 2024-37, Palliser Lane Perpetual Affordable Housing District Direct Control District. Man, we like to go for the long bylaw names, but it's accurate. It's very accurate. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to item G3, 2025 Borrowing Bylaws. Ms. Gibbons, whenever you're all set up there, the microphone is yours, and welcome to council. We're just getting to the good stuff. I don't know why the room cleared.
They always do when I speak. It's funny how that works.
No, that was good stuff too.
Borrowing bylaws, it's exciting stuff. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So as part of the 2025 budget, Council approved several capital projects that include debt financing as one of their sources of funding. I'm here to present the first reading of the borrowing bylaws today. The recommendation is as follows, that Council give first reading to Borrowing Bylaws 2025-10 for the ladder truck replacement, 2025-11 for the snow management facility, and 2025-12 for the water treatment plant 1 chlorine gas upgrade. The next few slides will give you a brief description of the project as you would have seen in the capital packages during the budget deliberations. The ladder truck replacement was approved by council for $3.1 million with $1.5 million from debt financing. The project is to research, specify, and procure a replacement for the 2003 Bronto Tower truck. The snow management facility was approved by council for $3 million with $1.5 million from debt financing. The project is to develop a snow management facility or facilities for processing snow and street sweepings removed from our roadways in a compliant manner. And finally, the borrowing bylaw for the water treatment plant 1 chlorine gas upgrade was approved by council for $1.1 million with $900,000 from debt financing, and that project is to upgrade the chlorine handling and delivery system. A quick glance at the town's existing debt limit and how much room we have before we reach that debt borrowing ceiling. The black line is our internal debt limit at 70% of the MGA red line limit. So currently, as you can see on this slide, we are below both of those limits with the debt that will be taken for these projects in 2025. And for information, the 15-year loan to local authorities indicative interest rate as of January 1st, 2025, which was the most recent available rate when I wrote the report, was 4.92%, and that will change depending on market rates at the time we actually draw the debenture. The timelines for this bylaw to be valid are as follows. So the borrowing bylaw will be advertised for 2 consecutive weeks, so this week on Thursday and then again on March 13th. And the plan is for me to be back for second and third readings on April 1st, once the advertisements are done and the petition period is complete. So in conclusion, our recommendation is that council give first reading to those 3 borrowing bylaws, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much. Looking to council to see if there are any questions. I think it's pretty straightforward. Thank you very much for your presentation. I will now move that council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2025-10 for ladder truck replacement. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll move that council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2025-11 for snow management facility. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. I'll now move that council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2025-12 for the wastewater treatment plant 1 chlorine gas upgrade. Anyone wishing to speak to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll move on to new business. Item H1. This is a capital budget amendment for CAP 7386 Community Fireguard Construction. Ms. Miller, whenever you're set up, the microphone is yours, and welcome to council.
Thank you. Well, and I'll just start by saying hi. Thanks for having me today. This is one of 2 community fireguard projects today. I'll be presenting this one, and Deputy Chief Michael Borrowing will be presenting the next one, as he's going to be taking over as the lead on the project. Before we got started, I thought I'd just take a moment to provide you with a quick project update as it relates to this phase of the project. So as a reminder, the work that's currently underway is in the Stoneworks Creek area, the Harvey Heights, and East Park Gates area. So that was the first application for construction that we put forward. In the Stoneworks Creek East area, that's the area that's the most complete. All harvesting and thinning of the trees has been completed. Our debris disposal has been completed and mostly done by an air curtain incinerator. We took care of the rest by mulching. We also have a temporary creek crossing that's about ready to be pulled. And then we'll start the road reclamation in March. In Stoneworks Creek West, we've completed the harvesting and the hauling of logs is nearly complete. The debris disposal will take place in the fall, winter. I just wanted to share a couple of pictures as well. So this is Stoneworks Creek West, and it was during construction on January 13th. And I took a couple of pictures throughout the project, just anytime I was up there visiting, so I thought I'd share them. One thing that strikes me with this is the amount of trees that were taken out really takes us back to what the valley looked like 100 years ago. And our representative from the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta commented to me, wow, nobody's seen this view for 100 years. So it was pretty striking to be there. This aerial photo was taken on February 12th and just shows the size of the Fireguard as well. It's also a good representation of the Douglas fir retention that we have throughout the area. You can see all the firs that were selectively taken or retained during the harvesting process. We've then moved on to Harvey Heights, where the harvesting's complete, so all the trees are down, and now we're just going through the skidding, processing, and hauling of the logs. Same with the East Park gates. That work just finished up on Friday of last week. In the fall, winter of 25-26, we'll be doing more debris disposal and the road reclamation in those areas as well. So when I talk about the skidding and processing of logs, when the trees come down, they don't look like this. So all of this happens on site. So I thought I'd just share a couple of pictures as to what that looks like and what they're busy up there doing, just so you can see what I'm talking about. I needed that understanding when I was up there. I was like, what do you mean? They put everything together and make it all nice for the log truck to come and pick it up. I mentioned that we were using an air curtain incinerator for the debris disposal on the Stoneworks Creek East portion. We were planning on using that for the majority of the project, but the cost of it became pretty insurmountable for the grant funding that we had received. So we did have to go back and ask for more grant funding because we used up a lot of the funding that we had for the whole project just in this one area. The benefit to that, though, was there's a lot of debris that's left over after this project. We're taking out a lot of trees in volumes that are bigger than what we thought, and we had a best guess as to what the debris would be. Because once you're out there and actually doing the construction, that's when you're finding out how many trees you're cutting down, how much is being processed, how much we have to take care of afterwards. The debris disposal is a very important part of this project. It makes sure that the wildfire mitigation that we're doing by taking the trees down isn't just left in clumps to have a number of bigger fires that can still grow over time. So that's one reason that first we thought we'd start with the air curtain incinerator. Why? Because there's limited smoke production, but it is quite slow and expensive. We found that there's only one company that submitted a bid on the RFP, so there's not a lot of people using this type of technology right now. We've considered pile burning. It's cheaper, but it's smokier. It's also very weather dependent. So this year we saw a lot of pile burning happen in the valley. We had a number of burn permits for some of the vegetation management work that developers are doing, that our friends in Alberta Forestry are doing. So we saw what the effects were, and while you can do it faster, there is quite a bit of community impact. We've also investigated biochar. We found that there's actually limited market to sell to, and there's limited market providing this debris disposal service as well. A lot of people selling biochar incinerators, but not a lot of people actually willing to take the wood and do something with it. We're still looking at other options too. Just with the sheer amount of wood in that area, Stoneworks Creek East, for example, or West, sorry, is the biggest block of this Fireguard. So there's quite a bit of debris that needs to be disposed of, and we're still investigating what other solutions might be out there for debris disposal. So, we've reached out to a number of industry partners and industry people who could use it to do processing on site and could use it as power for their plants as an alternative fuel. There's also companies out there that are taking debris and using it as wood pellets, but they're mostly in the forest management areas. So their policies haven't caught up to where we're at with the community fire guards. So we are planning right now pile burning for the remaining part of the debris disposal on this part of the project, but are still investigating what other solutions are out there so that we can make sure that we have a low community impact. The debris, I mentioned as well that we had mulched versus non-mulched. So for some of it that didn't get into the debris or into the air curtain incinerator, we have mulched it. This breaks down the vegetation into smaller, less combustible materials and can help improve the fire break effectiveness as long as we're not mulching the entire thing. So creating areas that can be spread across to suppress some of the vegetation like grasses from being able to grow up takes a little bit longer to burn, so it's not sweeping through. So we did this in some of the key areas, especially with the thinning, the aggressive thinning that we've done. So for this budget amendment, we did ask for and received an additional $580,000 from the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta to make up for some of the extra costs in debris disposal that we had incurred. We also needed to add in the revenue from the project. That's expected to be about $357,500. So the total value of the project is changing from $750,000 to $1,687,500. And our recommendation is that Council approve the capital budget amendment for CAP 7386, Community Fireguard Phase 2 construction, to reflect an increase in funding of $580,000 from the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta and $357,500 in other revenue, making the total capital project value $1,687,500. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller, and thank you for this presentation and recommendation. I'm looking to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Miller. I'm wondering, what was the total income from the wood we harvested?
We haven't received it all yet, so I can provide that at a later update.
Okay, so the 357 is going to be the profit on that total revenue, though, correct? Okay. Okay, I'm looking forward to that number. Just curious.
I don't know if it would be profit, but it would be revenue that offset cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the total revenue, they've already offset some costs, so West Fraser takes off some of the cost of it, and then we get the surplus revenue.
Okay.
For lack of a better term.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Graham.
So follow up on that. So will we be supplied with the financials of how that all broke out?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Good question. Any other questions? I don't see any.
Great.
Thank you very much. Okay, I will move the council approve a capital budget amendment for CAP 7386, Community Fireguard Phase 2, construction, to reflect an increase in the funding of $580,000 from the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta and $357,500 in other revenue, making the total capital project value $1,687,500. I will speak very enthusiastically in favor of this motion with gratitude to FRIAA for this additional funding and gratitude for all of the partners and personnel that are working to move this forward in a very expedited manner. This is a big lift, and it has big benefit to our community, and I just want to know that this work is really appreciated. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship. Happy to support this for all the reasons you mentioned, and also for Ms. Miller for just steadfastly applying for FRIAA grants all the time with a great success rate. I really appreciate the work you do there. Looking at some of those photos of the logs being picked up, one of the things that really disturbed me in that January photo is just how it is bone dry and there's no snow. And so clearly wildfire will be, as always, a serious issue, and this coming season could be another big one. So this is great that fire break is being constructed as swiftly as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we will now move to item H2, which is the 2025 capital project sorry, I just need to get it on my screen again here. CAP 7390, Bow Valley Regional Evacuation Modeling and Plan. Ms. Miller, back to you.
Well, further to Councillor Ma's comment, it's not just FRIAA grants I apply for. So good news, we got our Alberta Community Partnership for the Bow Valley Evacuation Modeling and Plan Project. So we received council approval back in October to submit an application. We were successful in that application and are excited to get this work underway. This project will really create resiliency in the Bow Valley by furthering understanding of evacuation challenges and mitigations at a regional level, confirm assumptions regarding our evacuation plans, provide considerations to be used in evacuations, and outline the roles, responsibilities, and high-level strategies for evacuations. For this plan, or project, we're the lead. Town of Banff and the MD of Bighorn are the municipalities that are officially collaborating on this project. We will require collaboration with Alberta Parks, the Kananaskis region, and Parks Canada, the Banff Field Unit, to better understand how all of the visitors in the area are going to contribute to that evacuation modeling. It'll include modeling of potential evacuation scenarios and a new regional evacuation plan that will supplement the municipal evacuation plans. So back in October, I talked about how all of our evacuation plans kind of in isolation, we don't really talk about how we impact each other or what the impacts of simultaneous evacuations are. So this will really help with that. I thought I would take the time to share some evacuation reminders, and just that the most valuable information about evacuation plans is that which you receive in the moment. You need clear information that comes out in a timely manner, and that's the key to a safe evacuation, is following the direction at the time that you're asked to leave. Residents need to be flexible and understand that conditions or plans may change dramatically, and they should prepare to be informed. So sign up for Voyant Alert, allow critical alerts on your phone, so Alberta emergency alerts, connect with friends and neighbors, and pay attention to hazards and actions you should be taken. And just as a reminder, as we get into hazard season, starting in May, we'll be updating the canmore.ca/hazard website so people can be informed as to what the hazard levels are. We'll share fire risk, drought risk, and flood risk. So with that, the recommendation is that Council approve a new 2025 capital project for the Bow Valley Evacuation Modeling and Plan Project funded by the Alberta Community Partnership Grant in the amount of $150,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Looking to see if there are any questions on this item. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Carser. So in the past, we've told residents that we don't, that we're gonna display information as it comes up and that we don't really have plans, so to speak, for specific evacuations because they're fluid and they're dynamic. What are we saying after?
So we do have plans because we have to outline the roles and responsibilities. It's just not information that would mean something at the time of an evacuation.
Right.
Understanding the difference between a tactical and a strategic evacuation and who takes the lead on what, understanding what considerations we have in the background, that's not the important information that residents need to know. They need to know the information in the community preparedness guide. They need to know what to pack. They need to know how they're going to get the notification. They need to know what happens if they're outside mowing the lawn and an evacuation order comes through and they don't have their phone on them, that their neighbor's going to reach across the fence and say, hey, did you see the notification? It's time to go. They need to prepare their documents. They need to contact their insurance. They need to be prepared to leave and to get the information from us. So understanding the route, yes, you should know the major routes out of your community. If you don't have a vehicle, you should know and look at the information in the community preparedness guide as to where to go and where to meet. But understand that all those things might change. So while we don't share the specific plan, because it wouldn't have the information that they need at the time of evacuating, we need to share that they need to be prepared to be informed. They need to know how they're going to get that information and what they're going to do when they get it.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
I would just add, just to underline, that for any given neighborhood, there might be 2, 3, 4 different plans that could come in place, depending upon the hazard that presents itself, the intensity of it, et cetera. It could change if it's a steep creek or a train derailment, or wildfire coming from the west, or wildfire coming from the south, or wildfire coming from 2 directions. Just looking at the tragedy that happened in Jasper, they have 3 major routes out of town, and you'd think it'd be pretty simple. But if they had told neighborhoods, in event of danger, you go here, there would have been a good section of that population that would have been driving into their peril. And so it's very important to know that we have these plans in place. It's important to get the information from those who know what the risk is. This project isn't about creating an evacuation plan, because we have those. This project is about working with our neighbors to see how those plans fit together so that there's proper funneling and we're not driving people into a different place. So this is taking what we have to the next level. And I think it's really important that people understand that. Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you very much. I will then move that council approve a new 2025 capital project for the Bow Valley Evacuation Modeling and Plan project funded by Alberta Community Partnership Grant in the amount of $150,000. And speaking in support of this motion, I would like to express gratitude to the Alberta Community Partnership for this funding, and to our neighbors and other interest holders who will be part of this work, because every one of these steps are important steps to get us even safer. You know, we don't know what's to come. All we can do is be prepared as we can for whatever is to come. And I appreciate that this work being done. Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Ms. Miller for her presentation. I'm speaking in favor, and I know the last item on the agenda and the next 2 are all very similar, so I wanted to condense all of my remarks in support of all of this work into one, and I picked this one. I think that over the past 20 years, I have had a front row seat to seeing how, as a municipality, we have assessed, mitigated, adapted, planned, strategized, funded, applied for grant funding, collaborated, created exercises, did exercises. And I think for me, I am so thankful, and I have this feeling of preparedness because we are prepared. And preparedness never stops. It is a constant process. And as we know more, we do more. As we learn more, we have the ability to expand our knowledge. The Jasper fire last year did that. But it also increased fear and anxiety. And that fear and anxiety is completely understandable and valid. But the fact is that this is a cumulative process. And over 20 years, we have done the work around wildfire, or the wildland-urban interface, as we used to call it, or some maybe still do. This is really important work for our community. This is a really big threat. Wildfire season starts on March 1st. And I think we can see right now with the amount of snow that we are right now at risk of fire. And I think that's significant, and it aligns with all of this. The work that we're doing with our neighbors in Banff, the work that we're doing with the different granting agencies in the province. the work that administration is doing and the leadership that I think that we are showing, so that when a wildfire threatens our community, not if, we will have everything that we need to do the work that needs to be done and to respond appropriately. And I really appreciate the mayor's remarks on evacuation plans, because I think that that's like one of those hot button anxiety points for people, where they feel like the information will make them have less fear and anxiety. But the reality is, when a crisis is affecting our community, we all need to be prepared, and we all need to follow the information that we have been provided, and that's good information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wishing to speak with respect to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move on to item H3, FRIAA grant application, Community Fireguard, Canmore, Nordic, Centre East and West, Phase 2 construction. Deputy Chief Borrowing, welcome to council, and whenever you're set up, the microphone is yours.
It worked. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Mike Borrowing from Administration, here to present the FRIAA Phase 2 grant application. First of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for your support with emergency management, Canmore Fire Rescue. The message that you guys are sending from council really goes a long way with the community and with us on the front line, so really appreciate that. Thank you. So the purpose of this presentation is just that FRIAA has announced its Phase 2 funds regarding the Fireguard construction for wildfire-prone communities. As you're aware, Canmore is an extremely wildfire-prone community. And we're looking at expanding the Fireguard into Canmore Nordic Centre, East and West. The timelines is we'd like to begin construction in August, and it supports the RFP presented to you. The RFD presented to you. So we do have severe wildfire risk. As you know, we are one of the highest communities that face that risk within the region. We are working closely right now with a lot of our partners. Our main partners include the town of Canmore, MDA Bighorn, Kananaskis Improvement District. We also work closely with the town of Banff and the federal government, as you're aware. Alberta Forestry and Parks has been providing technical review and funding support for us, and we're also prepared to do, and we've already engaged Indigenous consultation through the Aboriginal Consultation Office. It is a fairly straightforward presentation. As you know, this has been building off of the work that we've been doing in Phase 1, as Ms. Miller presented. It's been a fantastic project. We've learned a lot from it, and I do believe that it'll be fairly seamless going into Phase 2. That really does conclude my presentation on this one. I am available for any questions that you may have. It's just really an administrative requirement and some housekeeping that's required. So these are a few maps. Actually, I should ask, this is the east map, and then this is the west map. So the recommendation is that council approve the submission of a request for proposals in the FRIAA Community Fireguard Program for the Canmore Nordic Centre East and West for Phase 2 construction.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. And Councillor Graham, you have a question.
Deputy Chief, would you mind going back to that last slide?
Absolutely. I'm going to just start from the start instead of going back, if you don't mind.
One more pass on. Yeah, this is a hard map for people to understand where that
Sure.
is. So if you can just explain that one a little bit.
Okay, you know what? If you don't mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a new map that I got this morning that I've got ready. It's not in the presentation, so if you give me one moment, I can show you the entire Fireguard, what we've done, and also what we're presenting. So, I think this might be a little bit more comprehensive. How do I show this on here? Sorry. Caitlin's got it.
basically right. It's three.
Did I mention how much I appreciate her support? So you can see the different phases that we've worked on so far. So at the top of the map is Stonework East and West, Harvey Heights, and then East Park Gates. So what we're looking at is CNC West, just across the highway, and then CNC East, that's behind the Nordic Center. So, yeah, Caitlin wants to.
So this is the top left corner, the dark spot there.
Top left corner, and it ties into some of the work that Alberta Forestry did earlier this year. So they went in and did some maintenance on their vegetation management, fuel reduction at the end of the Nordic Center in the Kananaskis Improvement District side and within the Canmore Nordic Center Provincial Park. So this would be tying that off.
Yeah, so my understanding is that that's basically the top end of Georgetown, right next to the Banff Park boundary. Is that correct? It's really hard to see on this map as to what's going on here, but yeah, yeah, important area to be done and hasn't been done in a long, long time. So thank you.
Correct, and I'm happy to share this map afterwards. It just wasn't ready for the presentation.
Yeah.
And this has all been studied through expert advice through the town of Canmore. It's how we make our decisions as well. So you can see as well, moving further into the future, if you're looking at this map, the south boundary, as well as Deadman. So it's really just sort of all encompassing of the entire community fire guard.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay. So I will move, let's pull it up here.
What you?
All right, well, our world is being turned upside down in many ways. I will move the council approve the submission of a request for proposals in the FRIAA Community Fireguard Program for Canmore Nordic Center East and West Phase 2 construction. In speaking in support of the motion, this is just the continual rolling out of the work that was described to us at the very beginning. And I'm very pleased that we are moving to this stage already for this as we continue to move through these zones as expeditiously as possible. Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now, Deputy Chief Borgon, item 4, the FRIAA grant application for Canyon Ridge. Whenever you're ready, the microphone is yours.
Should be pulling up, I would imagine. All right, good morning again, Mayor and Council. Thanks again for having me. Mike Borgon from Administration, here to present the expression of interest for Canyon Ridge. So this is another FRIAA grant that we're looking at. So FRIAA announces vegetation management and non-vegetation management. Those two have come out, so this is for vegetation management. So again, as per the presentations you've been seeing this morning, and I know that you guys are all well aware of it, and again, appreciate the support that we get for wildfire risk. Past successes through FRIAA, as you have mentioned, they have funded vegetation management and wildfire preparedness plans, as well as FireSmart initiatives within the town of Canmore. This project scope is for the Canyon Ridge area. It's for thinning understory evergreens, pruning lower limbs on remaining trees, removing dead and downed logs and standing trees, and debris disposal. This is for debris disposal, there'll be a combination likely of pile and burn, chipping, or removal. So the funding needs in this one, we're having a grant request of $200,000. That's the maximum that FRIAA announced. The project cost is approximately $300,000. We will be looking at extending the grant funding. If that is unavailable and we are only allowed to work within that $200,000 budget, we'll be focusing on 100 meters within the infrastructure. So this does align with our policies. It supports the Climate Emergency Action Plan and FireSmart guidelines, and it also builds on our regional FireSmart collaboration efforts. The financial impact to this, if it's funded, we will proceed with the awarded budget, and if it's not funded, for whatever reason, we will continue to look at different funding options for the community and for the vegetation management plan. Next steps, once this submission of interest is presented, which we have done that, we're waiting for approval. We will continue engagement with stakeholders in the community, and we'll monitor and adjust the project scope based on funding outcome. So the recommendation is that council approve the submission of an expression of interest for the 2025 Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta grant for vegetation management in the Canyon Ridge area. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Looking to see if there are any questions of council. Seeing none, thank you very much. I will then move that council approve the submission of an expression of interest for the 2025 Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta grant for vegetation management in the Canyon Ridge area. It's quite obvious through today's agenda, and if one looks back over the last several agendas, that our approach to emergency management and dealing with the wildfire risk is multi-pronged and with many projects happening concurrently. And I just appreciate the continue to move forward on these vegetation management applications. And certainly if this is approved, I hope great success to our application. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I'm just going to do a check-in. We've got three more items. They're relatively quick. We're all good to continue? All right. So we'll move on to H5, Community Grant Selection Committee, Public Member Appointment. Mr. Stiver, were you wanted to say a few words in that regard?
I do, yes, thank you.
Well, welcome to the podium. You're no longer first-time caller.
I know.
Mike is yours.
Cool, perfect. Thank you, everyone. All right, so I'm here today to talk about the Community Grant Selection Committee public member appointments. So to give you a little context, we had our org meeting back in October 2024. We had appointed David Gunn and Victoria Mia to the committee, but unfortunately Victoria Mia could no longer, had to submit a resignation as she could no longer accompany the time required for this upcoming grant selection. And with that, I just want to thank her for her volunteer hours because this would have been her second term, so I want to thank her for her service as of last year. And then, so as a result, we have one vacancy that needs to be filled, and we actually have one additional applicant that applied to that committee, so it works out well. So we are recommending that you appoint Catherine Tetrio to the Community Grants Selection Committee for a term ending at the 2025 board meeting. Me again. All right, so yeah, here again, talk about the Assessment Review Board public member appointments as a walk-on item. So to give you some context around this one, on the January 21st, 2025 Committee of the Whole, they gave direction to administration to re-advertise for public member vacancies. Those applications were reopened at the end of January, and the advertisements were posted in the Rocky Mountain Outlook on the 6th and the 13th editions, as well as on our website. Applications closed on February 17th, and we received 14 total applicants, which is something to consider for the next org meeting in terms of how people are applying. So things to think about. And we have a minimum of 3 vacancies required to be filled. And as a result, we are recommending the following people. We're recommending 4, actually. We recommend to appoint Laurie Hogarth, John Pedwell, Christoph Breyer, and Laura Clippingdale to the Assessment Review Board for a term ending on December 31st, 2027. And I know this is a walk-on item, so you guys haven't received the kind of applications before. So if you would, if it's up to council, we could also go into a closed session to talk about the applications. So I'll leave that up to you.
I just would like to just ask a couple of questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That are appropriate. So I will move the council close the meeting to the public to prevent disclosure of personal information in accordance with Section 17, Sub 4, Sub G of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And I call the question. Are we streaming again? Okay. So I will move, we're back, and I will move the council appoint Lori Hogarth, John Pedwell, Christoph Breyer, and Laura Clippingdale to the Assessment Review Board for a term ending on December 31, 2027. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And we move to our final item of the day, H7, Purchase Policy Exception, ShareGate by Workleap. Oh.
Good morning,
We have a long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's right.
Here, yeah.
Thanks so much for your time, and I hope to not take too much of it.
Welcome to council.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I'm here today for a purchase policy exception for a tool called ShareGate by Workleap. So the purchasing policy exception, an expenditure not included in the approved operating or capital budget must be approved by council before the expenditure is made, unless the purchase is due to an emergency. The purchase for this is a contract for 3 years, which is outside the approved operating budget window, so council approval is needed to make the expenditure. The exception details, so ShareGate is a tool that we use, or is used by the IT department in the municipal clerk's office to assist with multiple tasks regarding the Microsoft 365 platform, specifically SharePoint, which we might know as TownScript. Oh, thank you. Yep. So the tool is used to assist with migration tasks, governance, development, and optimization of the platform, so it simplifies day-to-day tasks for both those departments. A 1-year contract renewal of the tool is just shy of $10,000 US, $9,995. If we proceed with a 3-year contract renewal, we'll save 30%, so a $20,990 US expenditure. So that would result in a savings of $8,995 for the town over the 3-year contract. So the recommendation is the council authorize administration to enter a 3-year contract with Workleap for the ShareGate tool so we can recognize those savings.
Great, thank you very much. And looking to council to see if there are any questions. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, sir. Just because it was in US dollars and today's an interesting US-Canada Trade Relations Day, is there a Canadian option to do this work for us?
I'm afraid not for this tool, no, and it's a tool that we have established history with for the ShareGate migration and for our governance. So on short notice, there's no known tool to switch to.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, good question. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
I will then move the council authorize administration to enter a 3-year contract with Workleap for ShareGate for the town of Canmore. I would just like to express appreciation for saving us some dollars if this is approved, and looking for those ways that we can do that. It all helps. Councillor Hillstead.
I'm happy to support this. Again, would be great if it was a Canadian company, but as there's not, happy to save some money.
Yeah. Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to? Councillor Mall.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you so much for hunting down a bit of a discounted option. You know, $9,000 US is probably 40,000 Canadian by the end of the year, so everything we can save is going to help. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And I move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously.